High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Welcome to This Week in Retro for the week of October 12th. Coming up on today's show...
Is the Amiga 500 about to drop?
The Game Gear Micro is released.
Dreamcast Mini, fact or fiction?
And Monkey Island turns 30. All this and more on This Week in Retro.
Up-to-date news.
For out-of-date tech.
The big question this week is, are we about to get a new Amiga 500? This story was submitted by me, because there's no way we couldn't talk about this story this week. You'll recall that Retro Games Limited gave us a mini Commodore 64 a couple of years back, and then last year they gave us a product called the C64, which was a replica of the Commodore 64 running a low-cost board inside which emulated the system. It wasn't a full hardware reproduction, and it appears to have sold very well indeed, which shouldn't come as too much of a surprise because the C64 was the biggest selling microcomputer of all time. I think it was about 16 million sales, something like that in total.
Huge numbers, yeah.
Huge numbers. So what we saw on social media this week was just a tease. It was a picture of what is clearly the silhouette of an Amiga 500, or at least I hope it is, otherwise this story is completely made up, but I'm sure it was an Amiga 500. And we don't know if this is going to be a mini A500, like the first C64 that Retro Games Limited bought out, or a full-sized replica. There are just no details so far, but we can certainly think about how we'd like this to turn out. So I'm going to turn to you, John. What would be the best case outcome for you with this device?
I think the best case scenario, there are many like lesser scenarios that will probably come to pass, but what I would like to see is a full-sized A500 with a working keyboard, with a nice selection of games, and then you combine all of that with an easy-to-use front end like the 64, the full-size C64 that's just come out. If they couple that with a solution for loading your own ADFs and include automatic disk swapping, I think that they're going to have something that people would want. Of course, in an ideal world, if you are an Amiga fan, you'd appreciate WHD load support for larger games and faster loading, but I think that that's not going to happen. That's an extra layer of licensing that I'm sure that they don't want to go through. What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, you're right. With the C64 that they bought on, or the 64, was it the 64? Wasn't the C64? Was it? They had
the 64.
The 64. They had a carousel interface, so you could just flip through the games and choose them. So it'd be interesting if they did that with the Amiga. But of course, you've got these multi-disc games, so they'll have to incorporate disc swapping. Of course, WHD load would be the perfect solution. But we're just so sparse on details, aren't we? There's an awful lot to consider. I suspect hardware-wise, this will be an ARM-based system using software emulation, just like the 64. As much as I'd love for it to have an Amiga or one of the other FPGA setups inside, I just can't see it happening for the price point that they'll want to sell this at, which I suspect will be perhaps around the £120, £130 mark. Now, anyone who's used an Amiga emulator on a Raspberry Pi will know that, yes, it works well, and 99% of the time you'll be very happy with that. But there are occasions when it can get a bit laggy or the input response isn't great on certain games. It's not bad, but it is noticeable sometimes. So I want to see if they can overcome that. I'm not expecting an AGA system. I want nothing more than Amiga 500 speeds, to be honest, because that's the system that most people that want this thing will remember. And if they can nail the responsiveness on that, with all of the custom chips operating in parallel when it's being pushed to the limit, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. I think that if you look at, recent Raspberry Pi based projects like the Bare Metal 64, which is basically just a very stripped down, efficiently running C64 emulator, if they could do something like that with the Amiga, and there's no reason why they couldn't include AGA support in a machine like this. I mean, it's not as if they're going to have real Paula chips in here and the ECS, OCS. None of that's going to be in this thing. This thing is going to be totally recreated PCB. It's going to be a brand new thing. I better not run into any sort of hardware or software incompatibilities, at least with the major titles that I want to play. If I bought this thing and I loaded up Wing Commander and it played at A500 speeds, I would not be happy, Neil.
Hey, that's exactly how I played Wing Commander back in the day.
I'm sorry.
It was a revelation when I got a PC and saw Wing Commander running at full speed. But you know what? Forget all of that. If you give me a terrible emulator, but a fantastic looking brand new Amiga 500 case with a working keyboard, I will still throw money at it. I'll rip out whatever you put in there. I'll put a Mister in there. I'll put an Amiga or a real Amiga in there. Give me a new case that isn't yellowed. And I'll buy it. I don't care what's in there. I'm really interested to see what they come up with case-wise with this thing.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
The big question is always, though, excluding us, because I know the answer for both of us, is there an audience for this, John?
I think in Europe, yeah, definitely in Europe. In the US, I've got to say no. I'd be really, really surprised if they brought this thing out over here, especially given their track record of, being a British company and releasing in England first, or, in Europe first. I just don't think that they're going to bring this here. The Amiga, it was a non-factor in the States, especially during its heyday, especially for gamers who had moved on to consoles or PCs by the early 90s when most of the best Amiga games were released. I think that we did an article on everythingamiga.com that tracked, the highest ranked Amiga games, and they all sort of came out between 1989 and 1992.
Right.
And by that time, the 16-bit consoles had come out, and the people that were really serious about gaming on a computer had moved on to PCs, at least in the States by that time. The Amiga audience that was left, of course, was still using it. They were using it for things like the video toaster, which is something totally outside the realm of gaming. So I would be shocked if this thing came out in America, but I do hope that they give us an option to pre-order it to order it from abroad more easily than the 664, which they put the kibosh on importing that thing to the States pretty early on. What about in the UK, Neil? Do you think there's a big enough audience to support, this reimagined A500 who don't already have a few of them knocking around? I know you can swing a cat and hit 15 or 16 Amigas in the UK. They're that common.
Yeah, I mean, it took about a year, didn't it, for the 64? I keep calling it the C64. It took about a year for that to become available in the States after the launch over here. So It would be interesting to see if they do launch it in the States at all. It's not to say there wasn't an audience for the Amiga in the States. People did play games on their Amiga in the States, but I just feel like the big box Amigas were more popular over there.
Absolutely.
And this is going to be aimed at gamers, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
The microcomputer audience has always been willing to get their hands dirty. And I think getting hold of an Amiga 500 and fitting a Gotek floppy emulator to it, it's really not that hard a task. So I know this is going to give us the ease of, say, HDMI output and all of those things, perhaps a virtual hard disk that you can mount. But it still has to hit a price point that makes it more economical than picking up the real thing. What can you pick up an Amiga 500 for over here? Probably about £100, £90, £100 for, a decent working one. That doesn't include an IDE interface. I know you've got to get extras, but you've got to find the balance. This thing, we just haven't got the details, have we? I think it's fair.
Right. And one thing that I did want to mention too is that this thing, it will definitely be attractive to people in the States, because one of the reasons why people don't go for the Amiga so much in the States is because they're so much more expensive here than they are over there. And when you factor in that most of the games that came out that people want to play are most easily found in PAL regions, having to do the region thing. And I know there's all kinds of workarounds that you can do with later Amigas that let you switch into PAL mode, but it still is not a perfect solution. And so if nothing else, if this thing could come in under $150 and it has a great game selection, there's probably an audience in the States for it. It's just, how many of these things do Retro Games Limited need to sell here to turn a profit? And that's just something we don't know.
And you know what? Of all of these mini console reimaginings that have come out in recent years, it's always the ones that didn't necessarily get a launch in my country that interests me the most, because I get to explore the games library of, say, the PC Engine. I know we had the PC Engine, but it wasn't popular. I'd love to have a Sega Saturn Mini. We had it over here, but it was so popular in Japan that's where all the exclusives are that I would like to explore that I haven't got to before. So yes, there is an audience in the States that had this first time around, but I think there might be a bigger audience than we realize that just wants to have the chance to explore it.
Yeah, you might be onto something there for sure.
Yeah. So until we've got more details, I think it's fair to sit on the fence, really, but I will be watching it very closely. And I fully expect this to be a topic of conversation here on this podcast in the near future. So keep an eye on Retro Games Limited for more details, and we'll see what comes out.
Neil, this next story comes to us from subreddit user Paul, aka Hermsky. And I've got to admit, it snuck up on me. I did not know that this thing was coming, and it's already here. A couple weeks ago, we talked about Nintendo's new re-release of their first portable, the Game & Watch. Well, Sega, or Sega, as you call it, has just shrunk down and released their first and only foray into the portable space. The Game Gear Micro. If you recall, the Game Gear proper, it was released in 1990 as a competitor to Nintendo's Game Boy and Atari's Lynx. It boasted the best specs at the time of any portable unit. It had a full-color LCD screen, and you could turn this thing into a portable TV with an add-on. It was easy to port games over to from the Sega Master System, so it immediately amassed a very large library. It was a force to be reckoned with. Now, Neil, what do you remember about the Game Gear?
Yeah, 1990. I think it was released in, was it the US or Japan in 1990? We didn't get it over here until late 91. It might be
probably early 91 for us if trends are to be followed at that time.
Yeah, I remember there being quite a gap between the release of the Game Boy and then this over here. It wasn't quite as close as that. But what I remember about it is, like most handhelds of the time, it was impossible to see the screen. And I've got a few issues here of Mean Machine magazine. Did you have that in the US, Mean Machine?
We did not have Mean Machine.
Okay.
This is the first time I've ever heard of it, actually.
Okay, so this is a magazine just aimed at the Sega systems.
Okay.
And it reviewed the latest games of the time. It was a glossy quality publication. But to get screenshots, what they're doing is they're photographing the screen of the Game Gear. They didn't have any way of outputting what was going on there. They had to take a photograph of it. But they probably had a box that they put the Game Gear in. It would have blocked out all the light. They would have had a special stand to put the camera above it. So these are perfect conditions to take a picture of the screen. And even in these conditions, in these pictures in the magazine, all of the screenshots look washed out and really hard to see. So, my memory of it is just terrible screen. But that's not necessarily the fault of the Game Gear. It's just the way that screen technology was at the time. The Atari Lynx had the same problem. The Game Boy, opted for the black and white non-backlit screen, which it could be seen under good lighting conditions, but it blurred like all hell when anything moved on the screen. So it was just the technology of the time. And, you would describe it as a handheld Master System because it was based on the Master System. You could even get an adapter to play Master System cartridges on it. So, yeah, portable Master System is precisely how I remember it. How about you? Did you actually have one?
Yeah. I had a Game Gear. It's funny because I don't remember exactly how we got one. I don't remember ever asking for one. And I want to say that my mom might have bought it for my siblings, my younger siblings. But I didn't play it a lot. Probably about 10%. One thing was that we just didn't have a lot of games for it. I remember we had Columns, we had a Sonic game, and then we had the Pac-Man puzzle game. I think it was called it wasn't Pac-Mania. Oh, geez, I can't remember. But it was a Tetris-inspired Pac-Man puzzle game.
Right. So this would have gone up against like Dr. Mario over on
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Sort of thing,
something like that. So the main problem with the Game Gear was that this thing ate batteries for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I mean, it took 6 AA's, and I guarantee you got less than an hour out of those 6 AA's. I mean, it was just horrible. And I will sort of push back. I do think that the screen, obviously, if you compare it to something like the Game Boy Advance SP, is going to look pretty horrible. But just the fact of having a backlit color screen, and never once did I think, oh, the screen looks like garbage. I thought, man, compared to the Game Boy, this thing is freaking, big screen TV theater, Dolby, it was so good that I wished that, that I wish Nintendo had sort of gone that way. Although, like I said, the batteries were a problem. I was never a huge Sonic fan. All my favorite games were coming out on the Game Boy, so the Game Gear mostly stayed packed away in a drawer. Neil, what do you think about Sega's strategy for selling 4 variations of the console? So it's basically 4 different versions of the same thing in different colors with different games.
You're right. What you were saying about seeing the screen after seeing the Game Boy. Of course, the Game Boy was the benchmark. So anything that improved upon that,
anything would have been an improvement.
I'm doing a bit of a disservice, by being so down on the screen. Thinking back in the time, it was impressive to see a color portable screen, but it was still terrible.
You can't go back to it now. That's for sure.
That's for sure. But yeah, as you say, we get 4 different versions of this. It's clearly made to make you want to buy them all, isn't it? You've got one in black, blue, yellow, and red. Each of them has 4 games on them, and it comes in at a price of $50. Here in the UK, I imagine that's going to translate to £50. That's probably what's going to happen. I don't think it will be
the normal screwing of the UK market.
You got it. It seems a little wasteful, I think, because yes, they want to sell as many as possible, but in the modern day, we do need these companies to think a little bit more sometimes about e-waste or electronic waste. They will ultimately end up in landfills. So, why not give us one console, maybe in a choice of colors, and then sell us your 4 game packs as a little cartridge? It could even be a little magnetic cartridge that snaps in and loads games over RFID or something like that. That would be fun. We don't need 4 of the same thing, but I know some people would like to put them all up on their shelves in all of the colors. If I had to pick one, I'd go for the red one. That comes with Columns, Shinobi, Revelations, the Demon Slayer, which is an RPG. I haven't played this. And Megami Tensei Gaiden. Apologies if I'm saying that wrong. Last Bible Special. Again, I haven't played that, but that's the 5th game in the same series as the Demon Slayer game. So for some reason, it skips 3 games in the series, but whatever. What you get in this pack is 4 games, a puzzler, a side-scroll and beat 'em up, and 2 RPGs. So I think for your money, out of all of them, that kind of combination is going to keep you the busiest.
I'm glad that you brought up the e-waste thing, because to me, this is, from a major publisher, this is one of the more egregious examples of somebody who's just begging to create more plastic in the world. These, aside from the colors, they're identical, and it just seems, like you said, it seems like such a waste. Now, the upside is, even though this will take up more space in the landfill, these things are so small, the effect is not going to be as bad as it was, for better or worse. They are so tiny, Neil. I watched some videos of this on YouTube, and these units make the Game Boy Micro look like a first generation Lynx.
Really? So,
they're just,
are we talking like keyring size here? How small are they?
It's just, picture a keyring screen, and then give it a little bit more real estate for just enough for a D-pad and 2 buttons, and that's what we have. This is a 1.5 inch screen. So it's almost where there are certain aspects that appear on the screen that are just invisible because they're just so small. They run on 2 AAA batteries, and like I said, the whole thing is about as long as your pointer finger. It's just, I don't know about this one, Neil. I'm a big fan of tiny things. I'm a big fan of taking big things and making them smaller models and stuff like that. But this is just, I think it's too small. What's funny is they come with a mini version of something called the Big Micro Window, which was something that was sold with the Game Gear as just the big window, and it's a magnifying glass for the console. To me, it's telling that they're marketing this thing with these handhelds handhelds
Yeah.
because they know that it's just too small.
We're going into the realms of just gimmicks now, aren't we? And
Right,
not an
right. I
actual
mean, it's
game
something that you
feature.
hang on a Christmas tree or something like that.
Yeah.
And I wish that I could tell you that the controls were great, but unfortunately, they're also a disappointment. The D-pad, by all accounts, is reportedly as spongy as a dish scrubber, and the side buttons, you have to contort your hand to be able to reach both of the buttons the way that they're laid out. It doesn't look like they're very comfortable to play. I think that it's clear these are being produced for the collector's market. These are going to sit, 99% of these are going to sit on shelves, in glass display cases, things like that. Nobody's going to sit down and play through these games on these machines. Again, I look at them as akin to the little tiny arcade games that are released as Christmas ornaments here in the States. I don't know if you've seen those in England. They're everywhere now, which, 10 years ago, I would have bought them all. They're technically playable. It's neat that they're functional, but it's more of a party trick than anything else. So far, the Game Gear Micro is only available in Japan, but you can order it from vendors like PlayAsia or wherever your preferred import service. Each of the 4 variations runs about $50, and the package, including all of the units and the big micro window, will run about $329. So if you like your gaming extra tiny, Neil, these are for you.
More hardware speculation now, John. The micro fans are hyped about a possible Amiga 500 device, as we discussed. The portable gaming fans have their Game Gear Mini, but the console fans have been talking about the Dreamcast Mini. The Dreamcast came up in conversation a few episodes ago, and I know that you and I are both big fans of the console. In an interview with Famitsu magazine, Yosuke Okunari, a creative producer at Sega, spoke of potential future products beyond the Game Gear Micro, and the Dreamcast Mini was his suggestion. This would bring games such as Shenmue, Soul Calibur, Phantasy Star Online, Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Radio, and Rez back into our homes in what should be a streamlined package. These mini consoles are really getting quite slick now in their execution. So, simple question. Good idea or bad idea, John? A Dreamcast Mini?
Well, it's a great idea for from a business perspective. I mean, this has worked for everybody so far. By all accounts, many versions of classic consoles sell big. The Dreamcast has probably one of the most devoted fan bases of all time. It takes the role of the scrappy underdog in the console wars. So there are people that really are really passionate about it. And so even if this thing doesn't sell, even if the original didn't sell in the numbers that the Nintendo or the Mega Drive did, there are enough rabid fans out there to buy this mini version and make it profitable, including fans that have never actually owned a Dreamcast before, but they're sort of riding the coattails of being part of this sort of looking back with fondness to the Dreamcast movement of the late 90s. It's an excellent business move, and personally, I'm much more tempted by a mini Dreamcast than I was the PC Engine Mini, for example. What do you think, Neil?
Interesting. Well, we're moving now into consoles where storage is more significant if the games are to be built into it. Dreamcast had the GD-ROM discs, which had a 1 gigabyte capacity. That all the games didn't necessarily use that, but it could go up to that. So worst case scenario, let's say you could bundle 32 games without too much of a problem in there. Obviously, you could put more on, but there are going to be cost considerations with a lot, plowing a lot of memory into this thing, especially compared to the 16-bit minis. You're talking about kilobytes rather than gigabytes with these systems. So there's also a question of online games because we're well into online gaming now. So will old game services be resurrected to support the likes of Phantasy Star Online? Will it be compatible with old peripherals so we can play the likes of Sega Bass Fishing or the bongos of Samba de Amigo?
I hope so. I hope so
too. I'd like to see that. It's all part of the experience of these consoles throughout their lifetime. So these mini consoles get exponentially more complicated with each generation, not just because you need to seamlessly be able to recreate the experience of the more powerful machines and all of their custom chips through emulation, but also all of those services and peripherals that surround it. So there's a lot to think about with it. I personally would like to see a Sega Saturn first, because I've explored the Dreamcast library a lot more than I have the Saturn. And I know the Saturn was big in Japan. So as I said earlier, there's lots of exclusives that I'd like to explore.
Yeah,
and just,
I agree with you.
tuck a Saturn Mini under my TV, flick it on and play those games nice and easily with HDMI output. I'd love to do
I'd love to see a Saturn Mini, and I'm sure that if this thing is a success, it could be on its way. Now, we do run into the problem that up until this point, up through the 16-bit generation of consoles, you can buy the cheapest, system on a chip that you can imagine that has the horsepower to run these games. When you step into the realm of 3D gaming, true 3D gaming, not like we had on the PS1, but something like with the Dreamcast, the hardware required to provide a smooth experience at the base level gets a lot more expensive, which is going to be reflected in the price of the Dreamcast Mini. So look for this thing to retail higher than all of the previous mini consoles did, I think.
Yeah, it had a Power VR 3D chip in there, and originally they were considering a 3DFX video chip in there. You just don't get that on say, a low-cost ARM-based system like a Raspberry Pi. You're just not getting that 3DFX emulation, are you? Yeah, although you can emulate a Dreamcast on a Pi. I don't know how well it runs.
Yeah, my experiments with that have been spotty. Some games run really well and some don't. And it's probably possible to make this thing run on something comparatively low end. But when you compare it to what, say, the NES Classic is running on, it's a big difference in the boards.
Well, I expect we'll have all of the Sega machines someday. It wouldn't be like Sega to miss out on a commercial opportunity to re-release absolutely everything at some point, as we're seeing from the Game Gear to the potential Dreamcast and everything else in between. But the Dreamcast does seem particularly challenging. I'll be interested to see if it happens, or if by that point, this whole mini concept, is it going to be all swallowed up into the thin client gaming services that we're seeing? And maybe before we even get to a Dreamcast Mini, you'll just subscribe to a Dreamcast channel or a Sega channel, and you'll experience all the games that way.
A Sega channel? What a wacky idea.
What a crazy name. Yeah. But I think we may get to thin client retro gaming for the masses before we get to perhaps a Dreamcast Mini. I'm happy to be proven wrong. Time will tell.
Neil, our final story this evening involves a gaming franchise near and dear to my heart. I'm talking about the classic swashbuckling point-and-click adventure game starring everybody's favorite mighty pirate, Monkey Island. Now, when I first read this headline, I thought to myself, this is a mistake. There's no way Monkey Island was released in 1980. But then, Neil, I realized 30 years ago was 1990. That's insane. 30 years ago, I should have just been a toddler or maybe even a newborn, but I was fully 9 years old. Time is passing. It's passing too quickly. Anyway, Neil, Monkey Island is 30. Now, it goes without saying, Neil, you're a fan of the series. I mean, you are a fan of the series, aren't you?
Yes, I am a fan of Monkey Island, indeed.
I figured you were. I am also a big fan. Monkey Island represented a sea change in the way that I viewed adventure games up until this point. Up until I played Monkey Island, I'd been riding the Sierra train for years and years. We just got finished talking about Ken Williams a couple weeks ago and about the hallmarks of classic Sierra game design.
Yeah, we were talking about his book, weren't we? And his book landed on my desk today. I ordered it after we spoke about it in that episode. And it arrived incredibly quickly, so I'm looking forward to reading that book.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We'll have an update on that after you finish it. So in Sierra games, you've got a point system. You've got the ability to die many, many times. Mm-hmm. And best of all, you have the ability to forget to pick up an item early on in the game, which effectively locks you out of making further progress 2 or 4 or 6 hours in. So if you forgot to pick up the lamp laying there on the second screen, guess what? 6 hours in, there's no going back. Guess who gets to restart? So just another example of the fun, in quotes, early video games provided the player. Well, LucasArts finally realized that no, that's not fun. When playing Monkey Island, you have free reign to go where you please, and you don't have to worry about death lurking around every corner. These games are designed to encourage exploration without punishing the player. And the star of the show, aside from the beautiful tropical landscape and all of the pitch perfect music, is the dialogue. Humor in video games is incredibly, incredibly hard to pull off, but the team of Ron Gilbert and Tim Schafer and Dave Grossman managed to create something that was as clever as it was hilarious. Neil, for its big 3-0, Monkey Island is getting its very own documentary treatment. YouTuber on a retro tip has created a full-length, in-depth documentary with all of the principal players detailing the making of the first game in what would become a landmark series. Neil, was Monkey Island 1 your first Monkey Island game, or did you start, midway through?
I did start with Monkey Island 1. It was on my Amiga, so I was swapping out the floppies to play it. There weren't too many discs with the first game. I think it was 4 compared to Monkey Island 2's, which was something like 11 discs. So that was a whole different story. But Pete from On a Retro Trip has done a really incredible job with this video. He's got interviews with all the key players, including the names you mentioned, as well as Mark Ferrari, who is an artist on the game, as well as an artist on Loom. And he does a great job of explaining how he developed things like dithering, which the Scum engine, which they used to run these games, having evolved from Maniac Mansion, from the beginning, it didn't even include support for dithering. That came with Loom, and then they really perfected it in Monkey Island. So everything from the graphics to the sound to the storytelling, he covers it in this video. Or he
and I was
doesn't cover
surprised.
it. The people that made the actual game cover it. He's got wonderful access to these people.
I was surprised. I watched some of this, and I sort of skipped around. I'm going to watch the full thing this weekend. But in the credits, what do I see? But the RMC, large and in charge, key player in this documentary. Tell me about your role in this thing.
No,
Neil.
I appear for about 30 seconds. Pete contacted me and said, "We just share your memories of Monkey Island." So,
executive producer, RMC.
No, nothing to do with me. Wonderful work from Pete, and I would encourage anyone to, for this video alone, go and subscribe to his YouTube channel. But he's got an awful lot of other outstanding content on his channel. So, on a retro tip. But yes, Monkey Island was very refreshing compared to the Sierra titles. Yes, you had humor in Leisure Suit Larry or Space Quest. Sierra titles weren't devoid of humor at all. They had lots of great humor, but they did have those unexpected deaths. And the dead-end save states, they were a real pain. And yes, LucasArts recognizes for sure. But I've got to say, Indiana Jones was really my jam at this time. When Monkey Island came out, I was still playing The Last Crusade a lot. And Atlantis was just wonderful. That was a great game as well. So I came back and revisited Monkey Island a little bit later. I wasn't playing it on release date. But I did really come to appreciate it. Yeah, great game. How about you? Did you start with the first one?
I did. I started with 1, but I came very late to the series. I remember playing this for the first time. It was probably 2006 or 2007 when I first found out about the Scum emulator. Because, again, I went from having an 8088 IBM XT to having nothing until my family bought its first Windows 95 PC. So when Monkey Island 1 came out, that was firmly in the territory of, me not being in the PC scene. I had, when we did buy that new computer, I bought King's Quest 6. And that really put me off adventure games for a long time for all of the above mentioned, Sierra reasons. And playing this game, it was such a breath of fresh air. It hooked me from the get-go, and I've played several of the others since then. Most recently, I've played the Telltale developed Monkey Island games, which are really also quite good and really funny too.
So do you actually have an all-time favorite LucasArts adventure?
I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I don't. I played Maniac Mansion and several of the Monkey Island games, I said, but I've never tried what are still considered the best games. I've never done Day of the Tentacle, never played Full Throttle. I've never played Grim Fandango. I know it's crazy, but just haven't gotten to them yet. One of these days, Neil. One of these days. What's your favorite?
Well, I mean, Day of the Tentacle is well up there. You have to play that. That's full of wonderful humor. And of course, you mentioned Scum VM earlier. It's the perfect way to play all these games. Although you will get told off for calling it an emulator. It's a virtual machine.
I'm sorry.
Day of the Tentacle, wonderful. Indiana Jones and the Escape from Atlantis. Of course, Monkey Island. And Monkey Island 2 as well is a wonderful game. I haven't actually played the third one. I need to get around to that.
I will say that I played the PlayStation, the PS2 Monkey Island game briefly, and I was not overly impressed. So you might want to skip that one.
Right. Okay. Grim Fandango was their first foray into the what was the name of the engine? They moved on from Scum into their new 3D engine. It might have just been called Grim or Grim 3D. I can't remember now. But Manny Calavera, the protagonist in Grim Fandango, I loved him. I loved the humor in that game. I was fine with the tank controls that everyone complained about. I just loved it. What else? You mentioned Full Throttle. A lot of people like that, but it was a very short game, Full Throttle. Never really got into that. And The Dig was a wonderful game because that came on 3D.
I did play The Dig as well. I'd forgotten that was a LucasArts game. So and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that a lot.
Really wonderful orchestral soundtrack. A really great atmosphere with that game. And Sam and Max again as well. That was a good one. Sam and Max Hit the Road. So but pretty much, if you mention a LucasArts adventure game, it's gonna be good. It's hard to pick one, isn't it? It really is. Well,
make sure again that you give On a Retro Tip a sub on YouTube and check the link in our subreddit to watch the documentary in full. And I don't think we mentioned this. This is completely free. This is not something that's being kickstarted or anything like that. This is available now in full for free. Make sure you check it out and let us know what you think of it in the comments.
So thank you for listening to This Week in Retro. Join our show subreddit and contribute your favourite stories from the world of retro.
Help us spread the word about the show by leaving us a review on your podcast app of choice, sharing our Facebook page, or just telling a retro-loving friend. See you next week for more up-to-date news
for out-of-date tech.